to be petted. A dog will walk away if it doesn't want to be petted. It's the same thing with any animal. So it's about living your life through consent and respecting the dignity of the individual and the dignity of their pain and their suffering. Not saying when I don't have to pursue an animal, I won't do it because I don't want to harm another being unnecessarily.
So it's about harm and consent.
Generally, yeah. So it's about reducing the sort of impact you have on another being. You know?
So would you eat fish from the sea which is dead?
No, so again, it's obviously a fish has had to die, and fishes feel pain.
No, a dead fish raised from. Would you eat a dead fish?
If it was killed.
No, killed. In the sea, sometimes you see a lot of fishes are already dead and they rise up.
I mean, generally, I think if an animal dies without something like killing it'll be like diseased or something. Generally, I mean, I wouldn't do it anyway because I sort of think it's gross. But you know, there's a lot of cameras. But yeah.
Remember what you said? This is what happens.
Did you say you would eat fish or you?
No, I wouldn't. No. So I wouldn't eat any sort of animals.
Are you a vegan? Right?
Yeah, I'm vegan.
Do you mind going on to? Is it based on sentience? Stay in. Is it sentience?
Yeah, so it revolves around the idea of consent. So animals don't consent to being exploited, and it's pretty evident if you look for it. So a dog wants to be patted, a dog will come up to you and you're patting it. As soon as it doesn't want to be patted anymore, it'll walk away. No animal puts its neck on a chopping block. No animal. To keep a farm animal, you have to put a fence up or it'll run away. All of these things. No animal wants to be consumed. No animal wants to be killed. And the beauty is, in today's day and world, we don't have to eat animals. We don't have to exploit an animal. We don't have to cause any suffering to another being. And I think whether you eat meat or not, it is obvious you're harming an animal. You're killing a sentient being, and that is painful. Whether you think you are allowed to do that because of the food chain, or
if it's not sentient, is that okay?
If it's not sentient and it can't feel pain, and it's not a subject, it doesn't have a subjective experience, then it would be okay.
See, this is what I find strange. So, if you don't mind, Brother Mansour, you can eat plants because they're not sentient. Is that right?
They're not sentient. They can't feel pain.
So you're vegan, right? Do you eat eggs?
No, I won't eat anything to do with an animal.
But do you see my point? Sentience. You said if it's sentience, egg is not sentient, right?
But it's come from a chicken that is sentient.
Oh, so it's different. So it's also an egg. So if it's not, so it goes beyond sentience.
Well, no, because it involves the hen. So in the egg industry, obviously in the egg industry, only female chickens are valuable. So all male chickens are useless. And because they're a different type of breed to the meat chicken, as soon as the male chick are born, within 24 hours they'll be either macerated or gassed. So by buying an egg, you're financing an industry that's
so you're going down the route.
You're still killing animals because you're killing the male chicks. And then obviously hens in the egg industry, whether it's free range, whether it's caged hens, whatever sort of hen it is, organic, they will only live for 18 months. And then after that, they cannot lay enough eggs to be profitable, and therefore they will be killed. And then
I'll finish on this because I'll hand back to Brother Mansour. But then it seems to be, this is what I always end up at, yeah? It seems to be the capitalist system that is the real major issue, and not actually just an egg and a chicken laying. For example, if you go to other countries, I'll just finish. Just on other countries, there's chickens laying eggs perfectly naturally, and so there would be no issue in eating that.
I would generally disagree with that. I think you can have ethical capitalism. The concept of capitalism is the ownership of property in the private sector. So it's me as an individual being able to own my own things. I don't think there's anything wrong with that. I think that you
don't think capitalism is the problem with the chickens?
I don't think
the number of chickens getting slaughtered.
I think it's the idea that we don't respect the individual. We don't respect another person's right not to be hurt. We don't respect their rights not to suffer.
Sure. Because a minute ago, I understand. Yeah. A minute ago, you mentioned the system of how the female chickens are being killed in the male. Because that seems to be involved in the capitalism and not actually the natural way in which an egg is made and then given to a human to eat. Yeah, you get my point, because you mentioned the system.
I understand what you're saying, but I don't think...
Well, in that scenario,
there is no natural way of getting an egg. Unless you walk around and
a chicken lays an egg. And you eat it.
So modern chickens...
No, my point anyway, I don't want to take over my Brother Mansour's conversation. However, my main point was this, and that is that the system you mentioned a minute ago is capitalistic system, about breeding too many females and killing off the men. That's a fact of the matter. Yeah. That's not happening in farms in other countries. There's other countries, for example, a village in Africa who has some chickens and they're just laying eggs, yeah? And the person is taking what he needs, is using it, then by your own admission, you technically wouldn't have a problem with that.
I would generally have less of an issue with that. if someone needs to eat an egg to survive, and that's their only option, then I don't have an issue with that. I'll hand back to Brother.
Excellent. So you are very much for ethical farming.
I don't think there's any ethical farming as in like plants, yeah, like agricultural sort of growing plants to consume, because plants aren't sentient, they can't feel pain.
That's not true.
So
what is pain to you?
So pain, so you need a nervous system. So you need a system.
For pain you need a nervous system? Are you sure about that?
You need a system to relay a stimuli. So if I touch something, I have nerves, and that's a system that tells my body that I feel.
Why would pain be only involved with, a living system with a nervous system? Are you saying other living systems don't experience pain because they don't have a nervous system?
They can't fit. No, so a sponge is an animal. Biologically, it is the definition of an animal. It doesn't have a nervous system. What
happens when we feel pain? What happens to us?
So what happens is, if I cut my hand, my nerves on my hand would relay that along a nervous system, an electrical impulse that is a discomfort. It gives me a negative stimuli. And it makes sense, because as a being, I can walk away from something that's negative. I can remove myself from a situation that's causing me harm, yeah? As a being, I can walk away from a negative situation. A plant evolutionary cannot walk away from something. A plant has to stay where it is because it's rude. It cannot move away. So evolutionary, it makes no sense for a plant to feel pain, because if it did, it would be under torture if it was and it would never be able to remove itself from the pain. That's why we developed a nervous system.
Remember what you said, a negative stimuli. When a stimulus is provided, and that living system reacts to it because it's discomforting, that's pain, isn't it?
So it can react to something but not feel discomfort.
Do you know when a caterpillar eats the leaf of a tree, what kind of reaction the whole tree
So a tree
goes
can react.
through?
That's true.
No,
So a tree can react.
what is the tree reacting to and why?
So if I cut the branch of a tree, the tree will react and it will grow back that branch. It may grow back more than one branch as a reaction.
When
it can't feel that. It doesn't
branch
feel
is cut off, why is the tree reacting? Is it feeling something? Is it experiencing something?
It can. I would argue it doesn't experience.
So if it doesn't, remember, this is a logical fallacy on its own. In a way, we experience. We are not same as a tree, and tree is not same as a dog.
That's correct.
Every living system, they may have differences in their makeup.
Yeah.
So, does a tree experience when a branch is cut off? Something.
There'll be some experience, but it doesn't have a negative system. It doesn't have a system where if I touch a tree, it doesn't relay to a central system. There is no central nervous system. There is no system inbuilt in it.
Another problem.
To have a negative
You keep talking about nervous system. Nervous system is for animals, right? That's the system
that's correct.
Right.
That's why we feel pain.
So in other living systems, you can't say nervous system. They have a system in which they respond to stimuli, in which they experience something. For example, as I mentioned here, you should have seen it already. This is when a caterpillar starts eating a leaf. What happens to the rest of the leaf? How do they feel? How do they experience? How do they react?
Well, a leaf hasn't got a brain. It's a leaf.
Sorry?
It's a leaf. It's a leaf. Like it's not got a brain. It's not got. There's no way a leaf knows what's
So
going on.
that really shows. You haven't studied as much in depth as it should be. If you made your whole life way of living,
okay, well, I'll give you an example.
Before you give an example, because of suffering and consent, look, we know plants can suffer, but in their own way. Secondly, we know
I
plants.
disagree with that.
It's not point of disagreeing.
But it is
Suffering is in what way? Because if you equate suffering as a human suffering, then you're only making a logical fallacy here. Because they're not human. Their makeup is different. They react and they do experience, right? There's a lot. Have you heard of plant neurobiology?
I have. I recognise that plants. There is a system involved in the plant growing, yeah. And if I chopped off a branch, the tree will grow back that branch. I recognise that. But the reason we feel pain and the reason we have negative stimuli is because we can walk away from that. We have a brain. We can.
So I didn't get the answer to my question. Have you heard of this new area of science called plant neurobiology?
I guess. Well, I wouldn't say they exist, but go on.
No, this is your own, what I would say, bias against the plants because you eat them quite comfortably, and that's why you have this bias, and perhaps you don't want to know. There's a whole discipline now called plant neurobiology involving prominent scientists who study botany, who study plants, right? They think just because they don't have a nervous system like our own, it doesn't mean they can also experience and react and also feel pain.
But they don't have a nervous system. They don't have something similar to a nervous system. There is no system that they have. There is no.
I would suggest, rather than giving you links now, go and research about this and see how do the plants first of all react when a caterpillar comes and eats its trees. We have seen this, how the reaction spreads. It warns the other leaves that there's an impediment, there's already an impending danger. A caterpillar has started to eat part of the plant, the leaves, so that it can then respond. There are many plants who respond if you touch, it closes the defense system. There are many plants like that. It's very sensory. They have sensory systems. How would they? I don't even know the names at the very minute. I know the name in my language. If you touch them, it's like all shuts down. All the leaves, everything, they collapse together.
Okay.
Did they sense anything? Do they have a sensory system?
There is a reaction there. Can I?
Sorry. My question is very specific.
No, let me talk.
No. Specific question requires specific answers. Do they have a sensory system which activated itself to make that response?
I don't think there is not in the same set. That system is not the same.
Do not say same system as a human or a dog.
If we accept that you're right and I'm wrong. If we accept that,
I would like to continue only on this condition that you and I, we respond to each other's questions.
Okay, I've responded to your question.
So, do they have a?
Now I'm saying, given that you're correct, say
don't say correct.
Because right now I can't tell. I don't have the right now in this conversation.
I would like you to answer it first. Do you consider that they have a sensory system?
I would say there's a reaction. I wouldn't say there's a. I would not say there's a sensory system. There is a reaction.
Okay, I want to know why.
There is a reaction.
When, for example, when you see that plant, you stay there, nothing will happen. The moment you touch it, it reacts. So did your touch start a series of...
It created a reaction.
Based on what? Senses or not?
No, it doesn't have to. It's not a sense, not in the same thing. But anyway. I disagree. I mean, you're asking the same question.
I want to know what you mean by. I want to know what you mean by disagree.
No, hang on a minute. You just don't like the answer I'm giving you.
Look. When you touch
the same question.
When you touch the leaf, is touch part of our sensory system?
It is, but it's in a different way.
Was touch a part of their sensory system?
Okay. It's not a sensory system. It is a reaction. It is different. But can we just
reacting to what?
Say that plants feel pain in the same way.
No, not given. We can establish that rather than.
If we establish that and we agree that plants feel pain, if we take that position,
why do you eat it?
What we do know is that there is less plants consumed on a vegan diet than there is on a meat-eating diet, because it is when you consume calories, when you eat, you don't just balloon in size, do you? Because a lot of your calories you consume.
I'm a bit lost in the initial reasons why you became a vegan. There were issues of consent.
You consume less plants, so you contribute to less suffering. So even if plants feel pain, which I would argue they do not, but if they do, you would eat less plants, and therefore you would cause less suffering.
So we can eat less meat. I agree with you there.
Would you not want to reduce the suffering in this world?
Yes. So eat less meat.
Agree with that. And the way to reduce suffering in this world is by being
ethical farming. Eat less meat.
There is effort. I agree with you.
So really, you're not really a vegan. You're thinking like a Muslim at this minute. I'll tell you why. A Muslim doesn't want suffering to any living thing. When we consume meat, do you know how we make it permissible to us? We can't just, kill a chicken or kill a cow or something to eat, for example. This life, we have to take it with the permission of God, only for the consumption of eating it.
You don't have to eat
it.
You don't have
for
to.
Playing games that people play, like the English tradition of foxes and rabbits or hares, right? It will totally disallowed and not allowed in Islam, because you are killing an animal for fun. In Islam, do you know how?
Why do you eat meat? Why do you eat meat? Why do you eat meat?
I'll tell you why. Why does a lion eat a deer?
You're not a lion. I'm asking you.
No, I will tell you, just to give you the picture of the natural world.
But you're not in the natural world. But you're not in the natural world.
Am I not part of the natural world?
This is not natural. There's cameras
Wait.
You're a megaphone.
Am I living in an artificial world, or am I part of a natural
world? You're
world?
not running around naked, are you? You're not living in the natural world. You're living in a society with rules and concept. The natural world is if I'm bigger, I have the rights. That is, might is right in the natural world. That is not the case in this world. There are laws. There are judgments. You cannot take from another. There are dignities. There are respect. You are given rights.
Yes.
That is not natural. Right. That is not the way animals live. That is not the way beings without moral ability live, okay? But what I'm saying is, would you not want to reduce the suffering? Yes,
Did I tell you already?
And therefore, you should go vegan.
I told you already. You are speaking like a Muslim in the sense that there should be minimum suffering for
that's beautiful.
all living
Then we agree.
creatures.
Then we agree.
Yes, we do. So you don't have to be a vegan. What you need to be, become a Muslim. And when you become a Muslim, I'll tell you, once you become a Muslim...
I would disagree with that, but go on.
When you say you disagree, this whole world, right?
Yeah.
You need to really understand your position in this world too.
Okay.
Not in relation to animals only, right?
Yeah.
Do you believe this world is a product of a creator?
No.
Right.
I don't believe in
so
God.
basically, your ideological stance has made you to think and accept veganism.
I believe in evidence-based decision making.
Very good. I believe in that too.
I knew you were going to say
Right. What are the evidence that this universe came from nothing? Is there any
the universe
evidence?
didn't come from nothing.
So the universe...
No one has ever said the universe comes from nothing.
A lot of people say that.
No, they don't. So
Have you
they
read the
say
book?
it comes from a very dense piece.
Okay, so why would...
Then it expanded very, very quickly, and the universe we are in is expanding.
You know what? I agree with you. Then why would world-famous scientists and physicists like Professor Lawrence Krauss write a book called The Universe from Nothing and sell it and become the bestseller? And his fans digest it and they believe the universe came from nothing.
But they may do that, but I don't believe that.
Right.
I would say the general scientific community does not say the universe comes from nothing.
Right.
There is not that consensus.
So
is not the case.
So is the universe?
Consensus is it comes from a very dense piece of matter, etc. It was very dense, and then something we don't know what it was. There is no consensus on that. It expanded extremely quickly, and that is the universe we're living in, and it is expanding. And there's
how
evidence
old
to
is our universe according to science?
It is
roughly
billions or trillions of years old.
About 13.67 billion years, right?
It's extremely old.
Right. So 13.6, say 14, round number.
Yeah.
14 billion years is nothing compared to eternal universe. If a universe is eternal,
Agreed.
it's more than trillions and trillions of years.
But they don't say the universe is that. They're not saying it's that old.
What are
they're
they
saying
saying?
since the start of the Big Bang. That is the period of time since the start of the Big Bang. They're not saying
They
that
said this is the.
There is the concept is it is eternal.
No, their concept is.
The concept is
our
eternal.
universe.
But here's the thing, right?
Our universe is only 13.7 billion years old. That means there was no before that.
Okay.
So.
Well, I disagree with that, but.
Do you disagree with
Here's the thing.
On what evidence do you disagree with these scientists?
Hang on. Logically, God can exist and the Big Bang can exist as one. You can believe in a God and you can believe in the Big Bang. You can say that the way that the religious texts speak are descriptive and they're not literal and they're describing that process. You can argue that. But what I would say is I don't see any evidence for God. I don't see any evidence for God, and I don't see any evidence for there not being God. I can't prove a negative. And you're asking me to prove a negative, and that's not physically possible.
Yeah,
I cannot prove that doesn't exist.
Of course, we prove negative all the time.
What I can do is prove that a particular type of God exists. But I do not fully understand.
Okay, let's go through these
Islam, and I don't fully understand. So I wouldn't be able to prove to you that Islamic God doesn't exist. I agree with you, but I would say in my day-to-day life, I see suffering. And to me, if I was God, I would argue, and God is meant to be kind. Is that correct?
And just.
is just.
And wise.
But is a child being born with a disease who is suffering from birth, is that just? I would argue that is not just. A child being born without any decision making,
Okay, let's think
without
about this.
ever making any moral
Let's think
decision,
about this.
is in suffering. I would say that's not just.
So your
no one
reason-
should suffer without reason, without cause or justice.
Right.
That is what justice is. Justice is an act and a consequence of that act. That is not the case for a child born with a disease.
Sure.
That is not the case for someone starving.
So let's deal with one by one, right? Okay. Let's deal with the first thing, child suffering. Give me an example of this suffering. What is the child suffering from? Cancer?
I don't think a child can be born with cancer, but I could be born. There are children born with severe disabilities.
Fine, disabilities. Do you know that many of the things could be because of what we do as parents? What we have done to our environment? Why we have done all this external stimulus all around us, and then they make the baby deform in our womb?
Do you have a family? Do you have a family?
Firstly-
I'm responding to your question, so I'm asking you, do you have a family?
I have a family, but let me move on.
If you did something wrong, say you came up and slapped me, yeah, that I would agree that's wrong, yeah. And instead of you suffering, your children suffered. That's not just. You should feel the consequences of your action, not your children.
Let's take that
That's
one
not just.
It's not just in your thinking, perhaps. I'll tell you why the thinking is quite out of place. When we know that if someone drinks alcohol in large quantities while she is pregnant, we know the child's going to develop fetal alcoholic syndrome.
That is correct.
Yeah, we know that.
That's correct.
So then you're saying this woman, the mother, the pregnant woman, should suffer, not the baby. But we know that the consequence is going to pass on to the baby.